portrays God as changing his mind, which is a very important position or point, because these occur also in what I call proto-creedal formulas in the Old Testament. The Bible portrays God as responding to people's petitions and sometimes even canceling what he had said he would do. Now, how dynamic omniscience handles these texts is by saying that some are statements about what God intends to bring about, others are conditional upon what humans do, and some are prognostications based upon what God thinks is the most plausible course of events. Now, some philosophical theological support: God and time. Divine atemporality is a package deal, and it includes strong impassibility and strong immutability. It's essential for free will theism to affirm that God responds to and is affected by creatures. Free will theists have always held that our prayers or petition can sometimes influence what God does. However, such actions are impossible if God is timeless. So that's why we modify that position. Now, regarding foreknowledge. I won't talk about middle knowledge. That was discussed in our first debate. Simple foreknowledge, we believe, with our theological determinist friend, that it is incompatible with humans having libertarian freedom. Simple foreknowledge is a view that God looks ahead and just sees everything at once. There are problems explaining how God can be responsive in this view, and I want to suggest that what I think is the key problem is that it's useless, and a doctrine that's useless isn't any good. Now, many people have thought that simple foreknowledge is exceedingly useful, and I give you some of the reasons why they thought that. But I don't believe it can deliver the goods. The problem arises because of the fact that what God provisions is what will actually occur, not what might occur. And once God has foreknowledge of what will actually happen, then God can't change it. Now, we usually think, well, if God knows that Billy Bob and Sally Mae are going to get married, and after which Billy Bob is going to become an abusive husband, then when Sally Mae asks God before they're married, should I be dating this guy, that God would give her appropriate guidance. Okay? And God would say, he's going to be an abusive husband. Don't date this guy. Get out of here. The problem is, God already knows that she marries him and ends up in an abusive relationship. So God cannot guide her otherwise. So it's useless. Hence, for free will theists, if simple foreknowledge runs afoul of the core doctrines of free will theism and its piety, and middle knowledge is problematic for the reasons given in the first debate, then dynamic omniscience is the only game in town. Thank you.
Okay, it's going to be an interesting evening. We've got certainly a lot to think about. I want to make a couple of responses here to Dr. Sanders, some basic assumptions I think about the nature of time and the nature of human freedom. But before that, just some other upfront questions that I'm not sure exactly what his view entails. Now, on his handout he says that God knows the future as partly definite and partly indefinite. So I'd just like further information on what part of the future is partly indefinite. Now, it said that the decisions of rational agents, presumably human beings, angels, and so forth, are unknown. What about, say, the course of evolution? Was God surprised by the extinction of the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago? Did God foresee the process of biological development on planet Earth? What about chaotic phenomena or complex chaotic phenomena as the weather? Does God not know what the weather's going to be 6 months from now? What about quantum uncertainty? Okay, does God know when an atom or uranium atom is going to split, so forth and others? So how extensive is God's ignorance about the future? Is it simply limited to rational agents, or could it also be subhuman and immaterial agents? Well, back to the central question. I hear that open theists believe that God cannot know the future, I think basically for two reasons. Number one, metaphysically there is nothing to know 6 months from now. And I also hear that such knowledge would violate human freedom. And I think both of those are flawed assumptions. First of all, the first assumption that there is nothing to know. Let me suggest the scenario of a chess game. You know, grandmaster is sitting on one side of the board, a person like myself is sitting on the other side of the board, in a sense, the moves I'm going to make 6 moves from now are indeterminate. Yes, but the grandmaster can know what he would do in terms of all possible pathways from the existing position. So we live in a universe in which there are causal connections. There are some hard connections and some soft connections, okay? But the state of events here, especially as God sees it, is not a totally chaotic, it's not acausal. And I believe the biblical God can foresee all possibilities and can see the tendencies and motions of the heart of all rational agents in all future contingencies. So I question that first assumption that there's nothing to know. That he can foresee all possible scenarios, okay, and also can choose to intervene, okay, in the moral tendencies of rational agents in those circumstances. Now, I think another weakness in the open theism approach here is with respect to the philosophy of time. Because I would suggest here that open theism actually claims to know more about time than perhaps we can know. I think Dr. Sanders is well aware of the fact that philosophers and scientists are not unanimous about the nature of time, or the nature of eternity, or the nature of the relationship between time and eternity. And I would suggest that a finite, rational agent, such as myself, who is embedded in time, and also as an Augustinian Christian, I believe that time is part of God's creation and began to exist here, that probably the creator of time, which I take to be the biblical God, actually knows more about time and eternity than I do. So what I'm saying here, I think it would be a trap of rationalism, okay, to reverse engineer my Christian theology on the basis of a philosophical understanding of time, which itself is questionable. And if there is a God, okay, who has created matter and energy, space and time, this God might know more than I know about space and time and eternity here, and actually might reveal, okay, in some divine revelation, a more correct understanding of time that would account for the obvious existence of predictive prophecy in the Scripture, for example. So I think that open theism is deeply flawed, or I think it thinks it knows more than it does about the nature of time. Secondly, I believe that open theism has a deeply flawed, and I think unbiblical, view of human freedom, libertarian human freedom. I think it's inadequate from a biblical and Trinitarian point of view, and reflects more of a Greek and specifically Enlightenment secular view of human freedom. And I would even suggest that it's, shall we say here, a teenager or adolescent view of human freedom, by which, for example, Johnny's going out on Saturday night. Mom says, "Johnny, where are you going? And when are you going to be back?" And Johnny says, "Well, I'm going out with my friends." And frankly, the less you know, the better. Because I will not feel free unless you don't know where I'm going and what I'm doing. Libertarian freedom, it seems to me, defines human freedom apart from the biblical Christian assumption, okay, that true human freedom, the type of human freedom that the Apostle Paul was talking about in Galatians 5, that is for freedom that Christ set us free. It's freedom in the context of persons in relationship.